Hello and welcome to the Hour of Sales Power. I'm Julie Crisera here with Joe Crisera, America's Service Sales Coach. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Julie. Thanks for hosting our show today. The Hour of Sales Power certainly has been brightened up with your presence, so thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you. So today's show is going to be selling to negative buyers. Joe, why don't you tell us why this subject is so important for us to go over?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can't control when we go out there in different service or sales calls that we go on, and one of those things is the attitude and the way the buyer perceives our problem. So when we first get there, we cannot control what we're seeing when we first get there. However, there is a way that we can use the energy of the buyer who has a negative energy or a neutral energy, which are not giving off any kind of a vibe, or a positive energy. So the idea here is, how do you take a person who has negative energy, who is acting very negative about even getting the call done, or even taking this call, time to do the call, or the investment to do the call. In a way, they're being negative about the whole situation. How do you channel that into a positive result? And that's what we're going to talk about today. How can we take somebody who doesn't want to buy something and turn them into somebody who willingly, voluntarily wants to make that purchase?
So let's start right from the beginning then, Joe. What is the first thing we must really seek out to observe at the start of every call then?
Well, I think we have to look at is the level of commitment that people are giving us when we first get there. So we get to a call and we say, so what's the reason for our visit today, or what's the reason for our call? Just to have an open-ended question to give the customer or the client a chance to express what they think the reason for the call would be today. Our dispatcher or our call coordinator tells us what this is about, but why not have the customer in their own words tell us that? So we ask that question and we listen to the response. And if we hear somebody who says, oh, thank goodness you're out here, we really need to purchase a new air conditioning unit, or we need to get a new water heater put in immediately, we need to get that done today, and I know it's going to cost a lot of money, so don't worry, we just got to get this stuff done. It'd be nice to hear that, wouldn't it?
It would be nice to hear that. So why is that so important for them to ask that right up front then?
Well, we want to know what level of commitment the buyer has, because if they have the one I just demonstrated, which was a enthusiastic commitment, where voluntarily, without any technique at all, the customer said they're willing to purchase, they want to do it now, and money's really not a issue at this point. That could happen. That'd be somebody who's very enthusiastic. We also have neutral buyers who really are not sure what they want. They're like, we're not sure if we want to get an air conditioning unit. So in a way, a neutral buyer is somebody who's saying they're interested in the service that you offer, but they're not willing to 100% commit because they're not sure about one of those things. The time frame they want to do it. They're not sure about the money that's involved. They're not sure about if their wife or their spouse really wants to get this, or maybe even not sure if they want to get it, maybe something their spouse wants. So there's a lot of different issues that are put out there as a neutral buyer who is not fully committing. So they tell you they want to get something done, but there's also what they're not saying is that they're actually making a commitment to doing it today, doing it, getting and spending the money and get this thing done. Does that make sense, sir? Mm-hmm. And then a negative buyer is somebody who puts an active barrier in the way. They tell you that there's no way we could buy anything today because we are getting 3 other estimates, or there's no way we could do something today because we just don't have the money right now, but we're just going to get prices right now instead, or there's no way we could do this today because my wife is not here. And so those are all negative situations where basically you're hearing people say they might want to purchase something, but they have an active reason why they can't, and then up front they tell you that reason. Make sense?
So it sounds like what you're saying is there's 3 type of buyers that we need to be aware of. The first one being the positive buyer, the second one being the neutral buyer, and then the third one being the negative buyer.
Yeah, or on the worksheet as we have here, it's the negative buyers first, because I think that a lot of times in this day and age, we see people who have stressed financially, and they put that reason out there, or the fact that they have other people they're going to shop with or whatnot. And the negative buyer, I think, is one of the most common scenarios, especially if you're doing like free estimates. On a service call, you're more likely getting a neutral buyer and sometimes an enthusiastic buyer, especially if it's like 100 degrees and they have no air conditioning. So, a lot of things depend on this. The weather, things like that. That kind of determines the attitude of the buyer before you first get there. But you determine the attitude of the buyer after you interact with them. So what I'm trying to express today is that no matter what buyer type we have, negative, neutral, or enthusiastic, we can shape the expectation of the outcome of this call. There's a way to deal with all those things. And one little lesson here for sure is that just because somebody seems enthusiastic, you would think that'd be an easy person to sell to. You still have to check your assumptions. Those people can sometimes be difficult as well too.
That's very interesting. So, why is getting the buyer commitment so important?
Well, here's why I look at it. I can never want to provide my service more than the client or the consumer wants to have my service. I'm not going door to door to try to create interest and desire. You know what I'm saying? Or when somebody calls me and they're looking for an estimate, they have to want the service I'm providing, because one of the things I have a value system, and my value system starts with the number one value, which is that I only provide service for people who want it and need it. I don't push people into things. So my motto and my value is to not push people into it. They have to want it and they have to need it for me to provide it. Make sense? So if the buyer's not ready to commit to doing it, I'm definitely not going to push my services on them. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because if you as a seller want to push somebody into something, then this is going to turn into a sales job or a strong arm tactic or a manipulation in a way that we trick people into buying things. And that's certainly not what the total immersion program is about. The pure motive process is to make sure that buyers have to voluntarily and willingly commit before we provide this service. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very good. So then, Joe, what is the first step that you really need? Let's talk a little bit about what needs to happen when dealing with each individual buyer by itself. What's the first step that needs to happen when you're dealing with a negative buyer?
So with negative buyers, I want everybody to understand this one thing. It's always going to come down to giving people two choices. So the best way to handle people who are negative, who are not willing to commit, is to really just put the information out in front of them. If somebody says, I'm not really sure if I want to get a tankless water heater. I've read about them in Popular Mechanics, or I saw them on the Bob Vila show, or saw them on TV and a home discovery show or network or whatnot. And I'm not sure if I really want one. I've heard some good things about them, but just here to get more information about it, type of thing. So in a way, you're hearing a neutral stance, not somebody that's more negative. Somebody who's open to it, but they haven't willing to commit. They haven't put an active barrier saying there's no way they could buy it. They're just saying it's there. So a negative person is somebody who puts the barrier out there. Somebody who says, I'm thinking about getting a tankless water heater, but I don't have any money. That's my problem. But I want to get some prices anyway, even though I have no money, and see what they cost. And so it's like, so the question would be, if I'm seeing people who are negative about the situation, who have some kind of an actual barrier, there's a reason why they can't do it. The best thing I can do is give those people choices. And the thing is that you're not in control of which choice people pick. However, you are in control of framing the question that you're asking. And so one way would be to start with going with the flow on the negative energy. It's like, well, Joe, you have to understand something. Money is not my master. So that would be another value system we have, to say, money's not my master, Joe. So here's what I can tell you. There's two choices I can give you. If money is tight and you don't have the money for this, I would definitely not want to proceed with a tankless water heater or even give you prices on it, because I wouldn't want you to feel embarrassed. So one way we could do is just forget the whole call, stop the process now, because I don't think, if you don't have the money for it, why even get into this and just go through all this time and effort and waste your time with something that you're not going to be able to financially put together. However, if you were interested in getting endless hot water, saving money on utilities, and having hot water everywhere in the home for 24 hours a day whenever you wanted it at your instant demand, and you could find a way to put the finances together, maybe find a friend of the family, or somebody who has the money, or even do credit. We could do a thing where we could do some financing for you. I'd be willing to stay and give you the prices. So what should we do at this point? Should we stop the call and hold off on this for a while, or should we continue the call and we'll figure out where we get the money from, whether it be a financing program or a 0% interest financing program, or whether it be a friend of the family? What should we do at this point? It's your call. So basically when it comes to negative buyers, it's always going to come up to giving people a choice, if you will. So for instance, if somebody says we can't really do this right now because my wife, she doesn't even want to get a furnace, like type of thing. So go ahead and tell me, Joe, I'd like to buy a new air conditioning unit, but my husband is totally dead set against it. So right now I'm just looking for prices so I can tell my husband what it costs. So hit me with that kind of a thing.
Joe, you know what? I'd really like to get a unit right now, but I'm really just kind of looking for prices right now. I want to be able to go back and talk to my husband about it later on and let him know what you said.
And what's your husband think about this?
Well, he's not really all on board with it right now.
He's not? Well, Julie, here's one thing I could tell you for sure. It really comes down to two choices we have. One thing is that we could do a thing where we could just stop the call, because one thing I realize is I only provide service to people who want it or need it. I don't provide service to people who don't. So I wouldn't want to force a air conditioning unit on you guys if your husband, Bill, was not on board. However, another thing we could do is I could talk to you today and we can go over what an air conditioning unit would look like. Then I could also have a second appointment with you and Bill together so I could get his input on it, and then we could bring it to a conclusion one way or the other. Which way would you prefer on this way? To just stop the call completely, or get you and Bill on board and get them on the same page we're on?
Well, I like to get him on the same page we're on.
So let's do this. Let's continue the call right now. Ask you a few questions about you and the family and the air conditioning system, and then later on we'll get Bill involved with this. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
So again, we are taking that active barrier and channeling it to a positive barrier, which is giving people a choice to either stop the call or continue it under the circumstances where it would be productive. And I think that's how the negative buyer is work. The first step is to basically think about which two choices am I going to give these people depending on the situation that's presented in front of me. So you've identified as a negative buyer, step one, to say that these people are putting an active barrier in the way of making a purchase today. Number two, it's like, what choice can I give these people, considering they're telling me flat out that there's no way they can do it? And one of those choices is going to be to stop the call or put the call on pause, if you will. And the other choice is going to be have a successful outcome, depending on whether it's the money or the time or the spouse, whatever it would be, to make sure we give that other choice to get that situation done in a productive way. And that's the important part, giving a choice. I think that's the first step when it comes to negative buyers, is say, I really need to give these people a choice. Now, sometimes you may have to take some time to think about the right choice to give people, because you're not in control of the answer. However, you're in control of the questions, and the questions that you provide will mostly determine the outcome of the answer.
So is this how you turn around a negative buyer, using by like you mentioned, identify that they're a negative buyer to begin with, and then figure out what questions you're going to be asking? This is how you turn around the negative buyer then at this point? Or is there more to it than that?
No, that's pretty much it. At this point we have to make a decision, because I'll tell you one thing, Julie. If we proceed on a call, a service call or a sales call, where somebody is outright negative about getting the job done, that's what our purpose is. If we sell air conditioning and heating or electrical or plumbing systems, and somebody's telling us that there's no way they could purchase one, but I'm having you come out to give me prices anyway, does anybody not see the dysfunction in that whole exercise? And so the idea would be that I'm more than willing to stay here as long as I need to, provide all the solutions you want, but you've got to have a level of commitment to get this job done the right way to begin with. And if you're asking me to do things like if somebody says, could you just write up, I got to go in like 2 minutes, I got to take off, could you just email me the options? That would be, again, a negative buyer, because that's a barrier that says I'm not going to sit there and say I don't do it that way, because then it's going to be sort of an argument about how we're going to do things. I would just tell them, well, here's what we can do, Julie. There's two choices I can give you in this case. If you want me to email the options to you, if you've only got 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to take a lot longer than 2 minutes. I'm going to need some conversation time with you, talk about your family, and then talk about the electrical system so we can make sure we find the perfect solution for you guys. I'm going to probably take 15, 20 minutes on that. So if you don't have time for this right now, we could just put this call on pause and do it that way. Or we could reschedule it for a time when you do have the additional time to have that conversation, because that's what I'm going to need to be able to bring this to a conclusion the right way. So what would you prefer, just cancel the call altogether, or go ahead and reschedule for time when you've got additional time to talk about this?
So it sounds like you almost have to give solutions before you even give your real solutions on how we go further with this call.
Well, one of the solutions is to have and Rick Picard, who's one of our $7 million salespeople, says that the reason he gets a lot of sales is because the customer has determined that his process is the most functional. And this is one of those areas where you're showing you have functionality to your system. You're not going to participate in a dysfunctional way of doing things. And so in that way of doing it, it's not about just canceling the call. So a lot of people overemphasize the cancellation part of the call when they give that one choice. There's a second part of it, which is a choice on continuing down a productive line to get the job done in a productive fashion too.
Sure. Do you ever have a negative buyer who does decide to just cancel the call?
Well, if somebody's determined to not purchase an air conditioning unit or an electrical panel or a water heater from me, then they're determined, because people are not. You can't always change everybody's mind. If somebody's determined to not do it, like you may get a situation where a wife says, "I'm totally against this, but my husband said to get prices anyway." It's all his idea. And I'm just not, doesn't make sense to proceed with somebody who's against it. For me to try to sell my services when you are out and out telling me you don't want to get the hot water heater, I would say, why don't we just put this on pause until you get more enthusiasm? Say, Julie, here's the thing we could do. There's two choices you've got. Either you have to get on board with the water heater thing, because one thing I would not want to do is to have one person in the family happy and the other person not happy after they purchase from us. I want to make sure everybody in the family is happy. So we could just stop the call until you guys figure out what you would like to do. I'd be happy to come back at any time after you figure that out. Or the second thing we could do is that you could think about whether you really want the water heater, and then we continue, we can get this thing done for you. So what would you prefer to do here today? Again, giving those two choices, which is one choice where we stop the call, and you guys have to kind of figure out what you want to do with that part of it, whatever the dysfunctional situation you're talking about would be. And the other part of it would be continuing and getting all the things that you need to bring this to a functional outcome.
Sure. Do you use these same choices when dealing with a neutral buyer as a negative buyer?
Not necessarily. With a neutral buyer, it's a little bit different. In that aspect of things, we're just going to challenge the assumption that we're hearing. We're listening for people who are not telling you they want to buy. So it's not that they have put the barrier out there. It's like, we're just interested in getting looking at getting a water heater. So with a neutral buyer, the language you're going to hear is not somebody saying, there's no way we're going to buy one. They're not saying that. But what they are saying is that, so we're just right now we're just looking at prices on a water heater, or right now we're just looking to get some numbers on an air conditioning unit, and they stop short. They're not saying no, I don't want to buy one. They're just saying right now we're just looking for information on an air conditioning unit. And so now with that person, what I would say is, okay, so I'm hearing you say that you're looking for information. But you're not going to purchase an air conditioning unit. So right now, we're just going to get information. There's no way you're ever going to purchase an air conditioning unit. I'm hearing that. And now the customer, I'm putting them on the spot, and they have to either agree with me and say, no, you're right, I'm not buying one, which now turns that into a negative person, which I can then use those two choices. Or they're going to get more enthusiasm. So there's no way so I'm hearing you say, Julie, so you're never going to purchase an air conditioning unit. No, we're going to get one. We just need to get some prices. So what is it about the prices you're looking for? You keep bringing up the prices. What are you looking for in the price? Looking for the cheapest price. Well, now that's going to be a barrier. Now we got a negative buyer. So you're looking for the cheapest price? Yeah, well, I can give you two choices right now. What's that? Well, one thing is that we can stop the call if you'd like to, because I can tell you right now that at our company at Acme, we're definitely not the cheapest price. We have the best service, we have the best quality, the best reliability, and everything. We can tell you distinctly why we have better service inside our presentation, but our price will not be cheap. You're going to find people on Craigslist or on the back pages some person who would come here and get the job done cheaper. There are people like that out there. Now, if you wanted to continue and work with a company that gives you better quality and service and reliability and a little bit of a higher of investment, then I'd be willing to stay at that point. So what would you prefer to do? Stop the call and go with the cheaper guy, or continue the call and be willing to consider the value we're going to provide?
I like to continue the call.
Okay, so there you go. You're giving that choice again. So with the neutral buyer, we have to determine they're in the middle. We're not sure if it's positive because they haven't finished that sentence in a way, right? So it'd be like something saying, hey, could you take a look at my air conditioning unit and tell me what's wrong? And I would say, okay, so we're just going to tell you what's wrong. We're not going to fix it then today? No, I got to get it fixed. See, now we got the enthusiastic buyer. Now they're committed to doing what? Fixing it. So you want to do what? I want to get it fixed. Okay, let's go take a look at it. Now we got that commitment. So again, we cannot want this job more than they do. In a way, we're getting the buyer to channel that emotion to having them commit more so than we are. You know, if you look at it this way, Julie, we're like a facilitator. A service person is a facilitator. They're not somebody. They're like the point guard. They're not the star. You can't take people's money and stuff it down the hoop. You know, you can't do a slam dunk with other people's money. But what you can do is pass the ball to the client and watch them score in a way. You know what I'm saying? So with neutral buyers, that would be it. Now with enthusiastic buyers, that would be our next on the worksheet here.
Right.
Would be enthusiastic buyers. What we want to do is just kind of double check that assumption. So somebody says, Joe, I'm glad you're out here. I need to get a new air conditioning unit installed today. That sounds very enthusiastic. Let's try it again. You be the customer and tell me how you want to get one done today because it's 100 degrees outside.
Hey Joe, I'm so glad you were able to make it out today. I need to get a new air conditioning unit. It's really hot in our home right now. I need to get that done.
So when do you want to do it?
I want to do it like right away.
Like when?
Like today. Can you do it today?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, what do you want to get done then? If everything works out good today at the end of the call, what do you want to get done?
I want to get a new air conditioning installed today.
Okay, good. Again, there we have the enthusiastic buyer, just making them repeat what they said to make sure that we're clear on that commitment. Now, if there's something missing from that commitment, all you have to do is mention that you kind of didn't hear that type of thing. So really, when do you want to get it done? So what's missing is the time frame. I might have a broken air conditioning unit. I need to get one installed. But what's missing? Well, when do we want to get installed, right?
Right.
And so this is what the highest end salespeople and service people in the business do to make sure they capture commitments from both positive people, neutral, who are not negative, but they're not making that positive commitment either, and also the negative buyer who is outwardly putting an active barrier in the way of doing it. Makes sense?
So is the enthusiastic buyer the easiest customer to sell to?
It could be, as long as you are hearing that commitment that's voluntary from any one of the three. Here's the truth. I think somebody that you have turned around from negative to enthusiastic has now fully made that commitment. It's like, I don't know what it is with people, but they're very, I call bipolar, where it's like they start out, if you're starting out negative and somebody kind of challenges you on that negativity and says, well, why don't we just cancel the call? If you don't have any time, I don't want to it's going to take more than 5 minutes out here today. We could just cancel the call and then we could just reschedule for another day. However, if you could carve out more time on your schedule, I'd be willing to stay here and get the job done for you today. It's up to you. Let me go ahead and call the office and get that done. Yeah, we got to get this done today. See, now automatically when they've changed, when you've changed somebody's mind in that paradigm from I'm not going to buy to yeah, we do got to buy, then they're 100% in. So I've actually found that the negative buyer, once you change their mind and they become a positive or enthusiastic purchaser, that those people are actually the easiest to sell to.
It sounds like the enthusiastic buyer can kind of fool you. And
it's a setup. So sometimes, I'll tell you what, with the enthusiastic buyers, sometimes I'm going to say that it was too easy. And you can kind of sniff it out by saying, wait a second. Everything is in place to get this job done. What's going to screw up this job? There's going to be something that screws it up because it always happens. And so what is it? So the enthusiastic buyer, I definitely put myself on a higher alert because what is it that I need to do? With a negative buyer, what do I have to lose? Somebody said they're not buying anyway. So if they've actively told me they're not buying, the only place I have to go from here is up. You see what I'm saying there? So in that way, the negative buyer has less risk because you're not blowing anything. Nobody was going to buy to begin with. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the time. One of the people here, one of the decision makers or people who are going to bring it to a conclusion, we're not on board 100%. So basically, you're going to be able to kind of channel this and get people to make a choice at this point. Make sense here?
Yeah.
Now, one of the best ways to do this is to make sure that you are doing this with as much care and comfort as you possibly can. The biggest thing about this, I can tell you, these choices should be given in a customer-focused way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
What do you mean by customer focus? Can you explain?
Well, if you brought up in the fact that I've only got 5 minutes, can you leave the quote on the kitchen table? Mm-hmm. I would say, well, Julie, first of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate that opportunity, and time is of the essence for everybody. What do you got going on, and where do you have to go? Is something that's pressing right now? Well, yeah, Joe. What would you say? What do you got to do in 2 minutes? Go ahead.
I have to leave to pick up my kid from school.
Well, your son is certainly lucky to have a mom like that who's certainly willing to be on time. When will you be returning?
Probably about 20 minutes.
Well, why don't I do this instead? There's two things we could do, Julie. I could cancel the call together, and we could just reschedule for another date, and you can reschedule a whole other date and do it that way. Or I could just go about and take some measurements, and you go to get your son from school. What's his name?
Wyatt.
You go pick up Wyatt from school. I'll stay here and measure the home and do some calculations and stuff like that. And when you come back, we can talk about some solutions at that point. What do you think of that?
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, so there you go. Now we have the outcome. So one thing is we could cancel it, or I could just stay here while you go do your travels, and then I'll come back and I'll have everything ready for you at that point. What do you think of that way of doing it? What would you prefer to do? Cancel it altogether, or bring it to this outcome where I have to wait 20 minutes type of thing, right? So what does I got to leave in 2 minutes mean? Does it mean you're never going to come back and that's the end of the story? Or does it mean that 2 minutes and I'll come back in 20 minutes? We need to figure that out at that point. Make sense, sir?
Yeah.
And so it's all done with a customer concern. Like, I'm doing it for you, so you don't have to rush through the thing. We're getting your son. Take your time, get your son, come back here, and I'll have all the information ready for you. So that's kind of like customer focused and high level of customer service as well. Make sense?
Yeah.
So even about the money, it's like I wouldn't want to be a burden to you and your family about the money. If money's tight, if you don't have any money, why don't we just stop the call till you guys get your finances in order? Because I would not want to be a burden. However, if you guys did have a friend of the family, or were interested in doing a situation where we could take our advantage of our 0% interest financing, I'd definitely be happy to stay here and get the job done. But I'm not going to force our service on people who don't have the income or the money to do this job. So what should we do? Stop the call together, or look into some of our financing options and stuff like that? Yeah, let's do it that way. Okay, good. We'll continue at that point. Make sense?
Yep.
So one thing I have to mention about this choice is they have to be given with customer focus. It's got to be in the best interest of the customer, those choices, not in your best interest as a salesperson.
Right. It sounds like to me like that can be where the danger lies. If you don't give a good choice, or you just give one choice, I could just leave right now then and come back. Right. It could be very dangerous in those situations. Well, Joe, this is really a great subject that you discussed with us today. Is there any other final words that you'd like to use to sum it up? No, I just think that in today's world where we have the risk of being reviewed online, every person who's watching this video, I want to remind you that it's not only your company that is at risk, but you personally are at risk to get a bad review. What I mean by that is, once your name, Julie Crisera, for instance, has been put up online on Yelp to say that we had a service technician, her name was Julie Crisera, and she came out here and pushed this service on to me, and she was very pushy like a used car salesman, and this is what happened, or you played some kind of dirty trick on people in some way, and then people put that out there on the internet. It is out there forever. You see what I'm saying there? And the internet has a memory that lasts forever. So even if somebody takes it down, people can go back and search things that happened in the past on the internet and even find your name that way. So just remember this, that giving these choices is not just a matter of good customer service and good sales. It's essential for your own survival in this new era that we have, to where everybody is being held accountable, sometimes fairly and sometimes unfairly. So make sure that before you continue to participate with a customer
who is negative or neutral, that you determine whether or not this is going to be a good fit for you and your team. Otherwise, you're exposing the entire team to a possible bad review and you personally to a legacy of bad service by being put up on the internet. Does that make sense? So that's why this is such an important call, to make sure that this is what's at stake when you don't give these choices. Make sense? If you'd like to learn more about it, just contact us at contractorselling.com. You can join our membership there, or you can just email me at joe@contractorselling.com, and I'd be happy to walk you through this again and maybe even talk to your team about this personally.
Well, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us during the Hour of Sales Power, and we will see you soon.
Goodbye, everybody. Excellence is the result of doing three things and doing them every day: training, coaching, and accountability. These are the building blocks you'll need to perform world-class service. Being the best communicator doesn't come naturally, and most people quit when they hit that first barrier. I can tell you that the top 5% work on one thing they can control. That one thing is the effort they put into learning, practicing, and creating new habits. No one will ever have the passion that we have to push you across the goal line. We won't quit on people who believe in themselves. Do you care enough to try something different? If you do, your family, your company, and your industry will be glad you did. You'll leave a legacy of pure emotive service that will live on for generations to come.